Good afternoon, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Josh Schimmels, publisher and CEO of the Los Angeles Business Journal, and it's an honor to host our LA500 Conversations with Icons digital event today. Each year, our editorial team creates the annual list of the 500 most influential people in Los Angeles. We unveiled the 2021 class in Monday's edition of the Business Journal. I'm really excited that we have an opportunity to meet a handful of them this afternoon. Our three panels have representation across numerous industries, including finance, healthcare, real estate, insurance, law, and others. Here's how today's going to work. Each panel will speak for about 30 minutes. While we could have easily spent the entire 90 minutes on any one of the topics, we wanted to provide a lot of information from several great leaders in a short period of time. Our goal is that by the end of the 90 minutes, you feel you've learned a lot about several topics and you've heard from and had a chance to meet a diverse group of leaders. Our first panel is entitled Centers of Influence. We'll then move to an overall state of Los Angeles, and we'll conclude with a financial update and outlook. I want to thank those of you who submitted questions to the registration process. We were able to integrate them, which means you've actually helped us to shape the conversation today. So thank you. During each of the panels, we're also going to be conducting live audience poll questions. So when you see these pop up on your screen, we'd love for you to respond and share your thoughts. We'll then publish these results online next week. I want to take a moment to thank all of the organizations that have made this possible. Thank you in particular for your partnership of the LA500 and for your support of our community of business. So many, many thanks to our 2021 LA500 sponsors: Eagle Equity Partners, EY, iHeartMedia, Jurdy, Marsh & McLennan Insurance Agency, Merrill Private Wealth Management, PIH Health, Society Real Estate and Development, Thompson Coburn, and UCLA Health. Thank you all so much for all that you do to support us and the entire business community as a whole. All right, well, it's time to get started. So I'm going to introduce our very first panel. Please welcome Kevin Legret. He's the president of Los Angeles and Western Division for iHeartMedia Markets Group. Pat Neiman, managing partner of Greater Los Angeles for EY. Jennifer Post, managing director of the Los Angeles office of Thompson Coburn. And today's moderator, Brian Haggerty, principal managing director, Los Angeles Employee Benefits Division with Marsh & McLennan Insurance Agency. Brian, it's so good to have you back here once again for this conversation 1 year later after we kicked this digital series off last year. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Josh, and excited to be back. It's crazy that we're still doing this. Hopefully we'll be able to do the CFO of Year Awards in person this year. But I'll say we have a great group of people here. I'll say before I start, Kevin, Jennifer, Pat, take yourself off of mute, because I know we always have those issues every now and then. I want to make sure we've got the all-star bunch here. So I'll start off and get all our panelists' input for the first question. The first discussion is entitled Centers of Influence. From a standpoint of being able to make a difference through your career path and the people you have the privilege to work with, what do you enjoy most about serving as a leader in Los Angeles? I'll start with Kevin.
Well, I think it's very simple. It's always the people. Los Angeles is an unbelievable city, an unbelievable opportunity, unbelievable economic growth, but it comes down to the people. If you've got great people that you can teach, motivate, and learn from, you're going to be set up to win. And that's the bottom line. You feed off of others' energy, and Los Angeles really is like no other city I've ever been part of. I spent most of my life on the East Coast, and being here in Los Angeles for the last 7 years has really made me appreciate the people. And if you've got great people, you can have a great center of excellence, and you can have an organization that sustains growth year after year.
Jennifer, I'd love to get your take on this as well.
Great, thanks. Yeah, so I hear a lot of what Kevin is saying. I think that really resonates. I think for me personally, it's really the opportunity to be a role model for up and coming lawyers, for folks in the gay community, for folks from different sort of diverse and cultural backgrounds. I'm finally at a place in my life and my career where I can sort of, be who I am, and that actually helps me excel and be really good at what I do and leading my firm and, assisting my clients. So I'm hopeful that that is sort of a quiet way to be a role model for folks in the business community and sort of in the legal community. And I also, want to take the opportunity to take this sort of position and this perch to help push other organizations to embrace diversity and to sort of grow their ranks, not only because it enhances their performance as an organization, but because it helps grow the community we all live and work in, which is kind of the greater LA region.
Pat?
Yeah, thank you, Brian, and thanks to the LA Business Journal for bringing us together today. In response to your question, I'll start by saying that it's wonderful to be a part of this today and to be with a few truly exceptional leaders like Jennifer, like Kevin, like yourself. And it's really a significant part of what I enjoy most about serving as a leader in Los Angeles. I just feel very fortunate to be able to regularly interact with outstanding, interesting individuals inside my firm, outside my firm. And Kevin touched on this. Los Angeles is unlimited in so many ways, with such a dynamic and seemingly endless mix of people, sectors, and businesses. As leaders, we're in the middle of that mix every day. And I truly enjoy this, and I find it very energizing.
Thanks, Pat. Jennifer, a question for you. In the last year, and I'd say even further than this, has included moments of political and social unrest, social justice movements here in LA. Do you feel that the legal community is playing a greater role in social and political conversations? And if so, should they be?
Sure. So I think, 2020, last 12 months, 24 months, we've really seen a lot of political turmoil and a lot of social unrest. And as you mentioned, issues specific to the LA community. So, first and foremost, those issues don't happen out there in some abstract way. And people are dealing with those issues sort of every day in their lives. So when they come to work with those issues, even though political events or social events are happening outside the doors of our law firms. And so really importantly, just internally, I think we want, and certainly law firms want, their employees and their staff and their lawyers to feel safe and valued at work. So inside of law firms, there are conversations, and there should be conversations about what's going on the political side and the social side, how we can support each other, how we can learn from each other. So it's really important that law firms, sort of as employers, take the time to help their employees feel safe when they come to work and remain engaged and productive. On the public side, it's a little bit more interesting. We're lawyers, we're guardians of the law, we take an oath when we're admitted to practice, we're officers of the court. So sort of by definition, we're here to sort of uphold and protect the law. And this can be done in sort of quiet ways, right? We can support organizations that, take care of social issues or political issues or community issues, so we can kind of feed them with resources. And we can do this in more affirmative ways, right? By coming out with public statements against injustice, against violence, against distress in our communities. And certainly law firms should take positions that support constitutional norms. It's just dicey, right? Law firms can attract clients or lose clients when we take public positions on things. And I think now that the whole world can Google everyone's position or look it up on Twitter or look it up on Instagram, it's really become a part of the practice of law and the part of our relationships with clients to figure out, how do clients want us to act? What positions do clients want us to take? The last thing I'll say is, law firms are already in the conversation in a certain sense. If you look at the clients we choose to represent, the cases we take, the transactions we work on, the industries we support, we're kind of making social and political statements through those actions, even though they're not articulated that way. And law firms have seen, some prominent law firms lost people because they took on political and social positions through their representations that some of their staff and community didn't believe in and couldn't get behind. So, setting all that aside, I think law firms should take a position. We can't be leaders in a business community, and we can't, profess to want to have a leadership position if we don't act like leaders. And if our communities are in distress, lawyers have the tools and the resources to take a position there, and sometimes actively. And I also think that we can't say, we have no comment, or we don't care, or it doesn't affect us, when the communities we serve and the people we work with every day, and ultimately the clients we are trying to promote, are affected by those issues. So we're in the conversation one way or the other. And I think we should be clear about that and articulate about where we stand on things.
Thanks, Jennifer. That's great. Kevin, I'll turn to you because in probably one of the more challenges that most leaders face today is the topic of return to the office or return to work. And I know, many of us are looking, my clients included, at what are other industries doing. I even had a conversation this morning, just to compare notes, learn best practices. And I'm going to be interested in your answer here because I have a number of clients in the media and entertainment spaces. As a major media organization, how is iHeart and others in your industry handling, return to work office protocols today?
Well, Brian, I think Jennifer used a great word a moment ago called dicey. It's a dicey and slippery slope right now. You have to think first and foremost about safety and productivity. Safety of your employees, the productivity of your organization. There's no question that 14 months ago, people were able to pivot quicker than any of us ever anticipated to being able to work from home and figure out how they can make Zoom and Teams meetings part of their daily repertoire, so to speak. What I think is really interesting is when you ask employees, what is their apprehension about returning to the office? They'll tell you that safety and well-being is way down the list. Simply, they don't want to go back to the way things used to be. And they feel in many cases, and we've done a lot of surveys, that a hybrid model actually leads you down a path and is a gateway to going back to 5 days a week in the office. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that we all need to take a look at our business and look at how we're performing. I think the in vogue way of looking at your business is how are you comparing against 2019? Are you going to be able to get back to your revenue numbers from 19? Are you going to be able to get back to your EBITDA numbers of 19? And what is the general trajectory of your business? And then make some really thoughtful and strategic decisions, quite frankly, on how you are going to move forward with bringing people back in the office. I've always believed the magic is in the work. There's no question. The magic is, when people are working together and you're able to figure out unique ways to collaborate and make a difference. But, it was interesting. There was an article today in the biz journals across the country, and they asked over 2,500 employees if you were able to either work from home or get a $30,000 raise, what would you take? And 65% of the employees that responded said they would much rather work from home. To me, that's a scary thought and a scary proposition. And it means that we as leaders need to pivot as we're welcoming people back into the office over the next 4 to 6 to 12 weeks, because it is going to be a very interesting time, but it's going to be a time that we need to put plans in place, and then we need to monitor those plans. And I think the greatest leaders, as well as the greatest coaches, are always the ones that can pivot and they can see just how their team is performing. And I think from there, you're going to be able to work things back. There's no question all of us will be in some sort of hybrid model. There will be some organizations that go back to a 5-day week. I think in the media industry, we'll be leaning more towards 2 to 3 days a week, but we're going to give people the opportunity at their discretion whether or not they want to come back more than that. But again, I'll use Jennifer's phrase. It is going to be a dicey time, and it is going to be a time that we're going to need to really monitor what's going on and be quick and nimble with being able to pivot.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, I think it's going to be a moving target and to be determined or to be continued in terms of a conversation. Patrick, I'd like to talk about community within an organization. Los Angeles is a very big place. Do you feel like it's possible to have that sense of community feeling here?
I do, but it's certainly different here than in many other cities with the scale, the sprawl, and really the variety we have in greater LA. There's no such thing as knowing everybody in town, and it can be really hard to develop a community feeling. We have so much variety in our business and economic landscapes. There really is no dominating segment to focus upon. You really need to break things down. So I guess a couple of things come to mind. Rather than one giant community, I always have seen LA as a number of communities that we can each be a part of personally. And it may be where our family calls home, perhaps at your kid's school, or where you worship. But I think there are many great communities in different parts of LA. And these are really important in our lives on a number of levels. Also, perhaps more through a career or business lens, I see community as a collection of individual relationships that I really believe are formed one at a time. They're nurtured over the long term. They can be initiated for a lot of reasons and in a lot of ways, but typically they're built over time. It takes a lot of patience and a genuine effort to get to know people around town without looking to sell something or any other immediate ask or request. But over time, these are the relationships. They develop into circles of people who can be very key in your life and tend to share certain values and goals. And I think, to me, that's what brings about a real sense of community in LA.
Thanks, Pat. Jennifer, getting back to trends in legal, what do you think the biggest legal trends are you're seeing for the balance of 2021 and even beyond?
So, I think a lot has been learned through the pandemic, but even before the pandemic, I think there were some, notable shifts and clear directions for the legal profession. So, above all, I think law firms are really spending a lot of time and money and resources trying to understand the client's experience of the legal services that they're delivering. And that goes way beyond whether cases are won or lost or transactions take a long time or are done quickly. This really deals with technology interfaces, the use of emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, and having really seamless communications with clients on all different aspects of the engagement, the legal work, the accounting, every sort of component part of those communications. And this was really never more true than during the pandemic, when all we had were electronic modes of communication. So I think, first things first, law firms really have become technology companies, and that will continue. Except for in-person meetings, every aspect of the legal practice is sitting on a technology infrastructure. And those infrastructures need to continue to be grown and developed and diversified so that they can interface well with what the clients are doing sort of on their end. And it's a lot of technology, it's a lot of software, a lot of things to be developed. But the rate and the sophistication at which these softwares are being developed and these platforms are coming online is really, really important and really impressive to engage and enhance that client experience. A lot of US law firms, on a different note, are tracking what's going on in Europe and the UK, where large law firms are combining with accounting firms. And so they're sort of packaging up services. So imagine if you're going to do an M&A transaction, instead of hiring, 4 different groups, the accounting firm, the law firm, the investment bankers, and so forth, just went to one place and you have one integrated team of people that always work together on transactions. That is a model that's emerging in other countries, and it's something that US law firms are looking at very closely. We're regulated differently, but nonetheless, these folks are either our competitors or collaborators. So we're looking at that as a potential trend in the industry overall. Clients are bringing a lot of demand for diversity, equity, and inclusion, for diverse law firms, for ownership of law firms by diverse populations, and for diverse teams of lawyers to actually serve the client needs and the client projects. And in a region like LA, the pressure to have that diversity is quite high and quite impressive. It's a good thing overall, but the industry has some catching up to do to make sure that it can meet the demands of diversity that the clients are bringing. And then finally, the other trend that is emerging and continues to emerge is for law firms to have very deep niche experience in very specific types of industries or transactions or types of cases that might be brought by or against companies and individuals. Clients have realized they don't have to bring all their work to one firm. And in that realization, they've realized that they can go find the leading experts or the leading lawyer in a particular area. And again, since things are so public and you can read so much about people and their practices and law firms online, people can find, and clients are finding, that they can source that niche expertise, and they believe it's more efficient. They believe it yields a better result. So law firms are starting to scramble to make sure that they are accumulating these niche practices and they can present those back out to the community.
Thanks, Jennifer. Let's shift a little bit and let's talk about our relationship with our clients. The ways in which we work with our clients and partners has obviously changed significantly, over the past year, over the past 24 months. Kevin, you obviously have a diverse range of clients at iHeartMedia, and when we talk about, how are you re-engaging with your customers and ensuring that when they're ready, they have your loyalty, your attention? And what are you doing at iHeart?
It's really not one thing, Brian, but what I would say is that, whatever playbook you used before the pandemic, it needs to be rewritten. And that's the real soundbite here for all the leaders that are listening in today is what we did back in 2019, what we did back in 2020, those playbooks, throw them out. What we need to understand is that business as usual no longer exists. There's millions of businesses, like all of our clients are dealing with right now, that are dealing with new consumer habits. And quite frankly, new ways that people are utilizing technology to engage with your brands. The challenge for our clients is how do you draw them back? How do you use, if you're a brick and mortar store, how do you bring people back that have now grown accustomed to utilizing technology? Is there an experience? What are the special things? And consumers plan that they want to be more engaged than ever. There's a whole grand opening that's happening in the marketplace right now. And the challenge to our clients is how are you activating against that from both a marketing and promotional decisions? Because marketing decisions right now are being made for not only the back half of 2021, but also for 2022. And they will significantly impact your business moving forward. There's a term out there right now called revenge spending. And it's the fact that people are sitting on more wealth than they have pre-pandemic. And the fact of the matter is that people really limited their discretionary spending, and they've been holding on to dollars that they typically would have spent on clothes, they would have spent on going out to dinner, they would have spent on travel, leisure, etc. And that this year, that revenge spending is going to be, you're going over to someone's house for July 4th, and instead of bringing over a bottle of Justin wine, you're bringing over 2 bottles of Camus. Instead of traveling back east to see family over the holidays during Thanksgiving and Christmas and traveling coach with your family of 5, you're now going to travel first class because you have that savings. And to re-engage clients now, it's about talking about those opportunities that are out there for them, but making sure that you're, weaving in both data and analytics into everything so that they can be successful and really track their KPIs and understand that they're re-engaging a marketplace and reestablishing their brand, while at the same time thinking about a new consumer and how that new consumer has really evolved over the last 14 months, and remembering that convenience always wins. Is there an easy linkage between their products and services and the consumer? If that happens, they're going to be successful. So we're re-engaging them very aggressively right now. We're making sure that we're having those high-level marketing and promotional conversations with them. And then most importantly, we're really sitting back and understanding what their unique challenges are and when is the time for them to reemerge and really engage with the general mass consumer.
Thanks, Kevin. And those challenges have to be different across all industries, so it's got to be a unique situation for you guys at iHeart. Patrick, when you think of the future of the LA business community, what do you see as the most important to ensure its strength and success?
Yeah, Brian, interestingly, the strengths of LA's broad business community can also create certain challenges and even make us feel somewhat fragmented. It can seem hard to get on the same page. So I feel that the business community really needs to find its voice in Los Angeles. It needs to be a united voice that is heard and respected throughout our cities, counties, and at the state level. We don't need to agree on everything, but we do need to sort through the many challenges that face our region, determine the true priorities, and I think do more to take action and drive change where necessary. These days, it is easier to avoid doing this. There will always be somebody or some group that may loudly disagree with or misunderstand our perspective. But I truly believe that the business community has a collective strength that we have not leveraged in decades in Los Angeles. And it's a two-way street. The business community needs to find our voice, and elected officials and policymakers really need to make the effort to understand the business community perspective and be open-minded to affecting change that'll improve the quality of living and working in Los Angeles. And lastly, I think it's important not to take the business community for granted. As wonderful as LA is, it is not the only option. And there is more competition than ever. And we all know of countless recent examples of other regions welcoming businesses, innovators, and families from Los Angeles. So we really need to figure this out together.
A great point. Kevin, the Los Angeles Business Journal hosted an annual Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Awards and Symposium last month. We had a chance to hear from the experts and regional leaders. From your standpoint, what can leaders do better to encourage, support, and implement even stronger diversity in our workforce?
Well, my specialty is not HR, and my specialty is not, looking at diversity. It is my job. I have to make it part of my job. I have to make it part of what leadership truly is. And I think all leaders, whether you're running, a Fortune 500 company or you're running a smaller startup, you need to challenge yourself and your org on how does your business truly look today, and how does it align with the outside world? And I think that's an easy a test. It's almost like the mirror test. If somebody wants to lose weight, they stand in front of the mirror, and are they happy with their bodies? The fact of the matter is with this one is, are you happy with the way you're set up here? And are you internally and externally really seeking out candidates that are, based on merit, and more importantly, based on ability? You're engaging them and bringing them to your organization. We've been very focused on bringing in individuals that, quite frankly, diversify our organization really over the last 36 months. It's not about our DEI, it's more about doing what's right and finding the right people. And over time, we're seeing the fruits of that really paying off, whether it's with the Hispanic community, whether it's with the promotion or the recruitment of really talented female executives, or if it's, promoting or recruiting African Americans. And we've worked really closely with Byron Allen. Byron Allen's been very outspoken when it's come to making sure in the media world that minority-owned organizations are getting the same type of investment levels that white organizations or organizations that are really built upon being large as a corporation but aren't diversified. And I think Byron's done some really excellent work that's helped us all really open our eyes to the importance of this. But in the same stance, I think it's a day-to-day thing that you have to challenge yourself on a leader is, does my organization really reflect the marketplace that I'm in? I can tell you that when I was on the East Coast for iHeart, our organization tended to lean more African-American because the population was there. As I moved out here to Los Angeles, one of the biggest challenges that we have is, do we have the right mix when it comes to both Hispanic leadership? Do we have the right mix when it comes to female leadership? And do we have the right mix of African-American leadership? And are those people the right leaders to really propel the organization forward? So it's definitely a balancing act, and something's very important that we all challenge ourselves on daily.
Thanks, Kevin. Jennifer, in what ways do you feel LA is poised for growth in 2021 and beyond? And how do you think, or how do you feel law firms will play a role in that rapid, or I'm already predicting rapid growth, but I'm going to say growth, and you can let me know if it's rapid.
Right. Well, first of all, I, support, what was just said about diversity. I think having an incredibly diverse workforce will always support, growth in Los Angeles and the greater Los Angeles community. We can only be stronger, through our diversity and, supporting our diverse communities. Los Angeles is an incredibly, vibrant place filled with a lot of original personalities and original ideas. And ultimately, everybody comes to LA or seeks a home here because they want to invent themselves. And that's also true for technology companies and hospitality groups and fashion and other sorts of industries. So, Los Angeles attracts entrepreneurs, it attracts, immigrant entrepreneurs, it attracts, young people, it attracts people who, feel that, Los Angeles is the right place for them. So there's a lot of energy here. Also, a lot of people came to Los Angeles during the pandemic from, New York and Chicago and other cities. And they realized not only could they sort of work remotely, but they could actually make a home in LA. LA has a great infrastructure, it has a great business community, it has, great culture and great arts. And I think those people are here to stay. And so, given this kind of diverse workforce and a lot of young people and a lot of immigrants and a lot of entrepreneurs, there's a tremendous amount of growth and aspiration embedded in the workforce in Los Angeles. And so for, all of those reasons, especially because technology has really taken hold here as a growth industry, I think LA has really become sort of the main competitor, if you will, to the Bay Area for growing and incubating and deploying, significant technology companies. And technology growth is going to support, lots and lots of business sectors. Obviously, law firms will be here to support technology companies. It will push law firms and lawyers like me to be more, innovative and creative in how we think about new issues and cutting edge technologies. And I think LA can really sort of own a big part of that industrial growth inside of California. There were days when no one ever, dared to compete with Silicon Valley in terms of venture capital and, technology growth and innovation. But there's so much of it here in LA, and it's fueled by so many people coming to Los Angeles to enjoy so many other things that the business community and the civic community have built. I really feel that Los Angeles, is going to continue to be and continue to grow as sort of a center and a really significant venue for technology companies in California. And that will propel growth for, a long time to come.
Thanks, Jennifer. I think a little bit of what Pat said too, in terms of you have the policies in place in order to continue to support that growth and not see as much exit, I think is definitely comes into play here. So last question. Surprisingly, we are doing well on time, but I'll give you each 30 seconds to respond. So our last question is going to address the group from your perspective, industry. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the Los Angeles region's potential for growth in 2021? I'll start with Pat and then move to Kevin and go to Jennifer.
Yeah. Hey, if COVID infection rates remain under control, Brian, I see a lot of growth opportunity for the remainder of 2021. So I'll say a 10. Beyond 2021, I do feel growth will depend increasingly on competition from other regions, the regulatory environment we talked about, and policy decisions that affect the business community and working families as well.
Kevin?
I'm going to echo what Patrick said. I mean, I'm a 10 both this year and next year. I can't sugarcoat how difficult the last year has been. Going forward, we have, as an organization, bigger numbers. And I think because of, the Los Angeles marketplace, the team that we have here at iHeart, the platform that we have, that we can get back quicker than most. But I think it's going to be hard. I mean, I think we're going to have to work hard for it, but I think there's no question it's both a 10 for the back half of 2021, especially as regulations keep getting lifted and there's opportunities for consumers to engage in the marketplace at their leisure. And there's a lot more liberty for them to be able to do that. And then 2022, I think it's just a matter of us, riding this wave. And UCLA came out today and had a great quote that the economic snapback is going to be larger than World War II, especially in California and in places like Los Angeles. So I'm really optimistic about what the future holds, Brian.
Finally, Jennifer.
Great. Yeah, I'm very bullish about the remainder of 2021 and 2022, and I guess beyond. Obviously, the pandemic, set back a lot of goals for a lot of people and businesses, but we're going to more than compensate for that. And thankfully, we're moving past, I guess, the worst of the pandemic. We're dealing with some of the legacy, but we're moving swiftly to put as much of that behind us as possible. I agree with some of the sentiment. We have challenges, the rising cost of housing, needing to make sure good education is accessible to all working families in LA, and the same, for healthcare for families. So, we have some issues that, the business community and the civic community need to get together on, but the potential is tremendous, and I don't know why LA would do any worse than any other region of the country. And in fact, I think it's very well situated to do well at a 10 or beyond over the next 12 or 24 months.
Perfect. Jennifer, Pat, Kevin, thank you so much for having this conversation with me, and I'm going to hand it back to Josh. Appreciate you being a part of this.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brian, and really to each of our three panelists, Brian, Kevin, Jennifer, and Pat. I want to thank you. What a great way to start this conversation today from three very different industry perspectives, including Brian. We have four COIs, our centers of influence. Those of you who are out in the communities, you're talking to clients, you're advisors to clients, you're consulting businesses, You have so much insight. We appreciate everything that you were able to do to contribute. So thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to the state of Los Angeles discussion, which I have the privilege of moderating today. Let's go ahead and meet our panelists and get started. First, please welcome Paul Martin Kovic. He's shareholder and CEO of Journey. Kofi Narte, CEO of Society Real Estate and Development. And Janice Spizo, president of UCLA Health, CEO of UCLA Hospital System, and associate vice chancellor of UCLA Health Sciences. Welcome. Thank you all so much for being a part of this. I want to start off as we talk about what this panel is, which is the state of LA. It's hard not to start with what the past years look like. We've seen innovation, we've seen challenges. After all, it's what got us to our current state today. So I'd like to ask each of you the following question. How did your organization and or your industry in general make the changes needed, not just to survive the last 15 months or more, but really to thrive in it? I couldn't think of a more appropriate starting place than healthcare. Janice, what are your thoughts? What did you see from your industry this year?
Well, thank you, Josh. And we've had an incredible year, as the entire LA has had. But at UCLA Health, as a large healthcare organization, we had always prepared for emergencies, whether it be earthquakes, whether it be mass casualty incidents, or emerging infectious diseases. And we've been through some other emerging infectious diseases in the past with SARS, with MERS. But over a year and a half ago, when the global pandemic started to unfold, we really, I think, had no idea of the extent and the duration that was ahead of us. So with us, we began very quickly working with our over 35,000 employees to really pivot from the norm of our day-to-day business and begin to face head-on the unknown challenges. And that required us working very closely with the Centers for Disease Control, with LA County Public Health, with Los Angeles County Emergency Services, and with all the other hospitals in Los Angeles. You know, in the first few months, we had to change every aspect of our business. We had to create over 300 new patient care protocols. We had to identify the type of personal protective equipment that we needed to keep our staff and patients safe. We had to engage in major new supply chain acquisition. We had to really do a lot of retraining as information was emerging on how COVID-19 was spread. We were learning a lot in those processes. And we, as a research organization, were rapidly working on how could we develop more fast and innovative testing and treatment so that we could begin to control this pandemic. What I will say now is, looking back on what we've learned, there's actually been so many silver linings. We've learned that we can really leverage our innovation, our technology, and our research to really create safe environments, not only to care for COVID-19 patients, but for all patients who present for care. And that's a really important role for us as a major healthcare institution. We've also learned that we know how to safely protect our staff when caring for patients with COVID-19. And I think one of the other things that it pushed us to is to use our investments in innovation and technology to really leverage new ways to care for patients with telehealth, with remote monitoring, and with adaptability of not only our patients, but of our healthcare workforce in order to make that work for our community and serve as many patients as possible.
Janice, thank you for sharing that. I can't imagine the challenges that your industry in particular had to endure. And, you know, on behalf of all of us here in Los Angeles and throughout the country, thank you to UCLA Health, the hospital system, and our entire healthcare industry for keeping us all safe and doing everything that all of you did over this last year and a half. Kofi, tell us a little bit from your standpoint. What did you see? What did you learn?
Well, first, thank you, Janice, UCLA Health. I had both my kids there, great experience. The first thing was really just safety first. You know, when this pandemic hit, everyone was concerned. You know, we ended up having to shelter in place, safer at home. So the first priority was everyone's health and safety. So our outreach was really just to engage with our clients, our contacts, our friends, our family to make sure everything was fine. And then in terms of real estate, it was interesting because we were initially deemed an essential industry, including real estate agents and brokers. But that was then relegated just to development and infrastructure building. And so we weren't, and then we were again. But what was happening behind the scenes was very, an increase in pent-up demand for housing and the way that people looked at housing. So when we were able to start selling properties again and selling developments again, we saw the floodgates open in terms of demand. And really accelerating into that momentum is where a lot of people in this industry had a chance to thrive. I mean, I launched my own firm in the middle of the pandemic. And part of that was, an opportunity to what I describe as social cocoon, like a social cocooning, like how am I going to come out of the pandemic better than I came into it, right? Health and safety first, and how am I going to come out the other side? But we were able to, paddle with that momentum and really accelerate the growth in a market that already had crazy increased demand.
Well, thank you for sharing that point of view, and really congratulations for being able to succeed in launching your own business in a time that nobody would want to be launching their own business. Looking at your background on your screen, the Mamba mentality, congratulations, and way to keep pushing forward.
Thanks.
Paul, what did you see from the design and architecture space?
Well, I think Jennifer Post mentioned, technology is a big disruptor in professional services. And, we were pretty far along in deploying our work digitally as we work all over the world. What we didn't, when the COVID hit so fast, we were a little unprepared. We got hit with a malware attack about 2 weeks into the office shutdown. And that was, really took a lot of time to get through. But we pretty much, I think in terms of the way we work, architecture is a personal relationship business. So you really have to, collaborate, very closely. But I think, we learned to do that even better. Most of our work is in China. So one of the things with COVID is I was worried our contracts were going to terminate, but actually the reverse happened. China was only shut down really 3 months effectively. And we got a lot of new work, and we've grown our China office and grown our LA staff. But a lot of the changes in the way the office works, certainly the commuting and things, I've always been against the commuting because it's such a waste of time. So I think we've learned to work, more interactively in, not being in the office. So I think it's, we've done very well.
Yeah, Paul, I think that's so interesting that you mentioned that early on you were hit with a malware attack. We held a panel about a month ago on cybersecurity, and it's amazing to see the impact of technology on business. In so many ways, it's been fantastic, and it's been allowed us to rethink and do many things differently. On the other hand, it's also opened businesses up to incredible risks and liabilities, whether it be companies working from home through unsecure networks, or server issues in the office, or attacks that are being magnified right now. So I think it's really interesting to see how we've all persevered and moved forward. Janice, I want to go back to something you said, because we talked a little bit about challenges, and we talked about innovation and how companies have had to rethink so many areas over the last year. So as we're talking about progress and growth, I'm curious to know what specific healthcare innovations were developed or improved during the pandemic that you believe are now probably here to stay, whether it be specific to UCLA or specific to your industry as a whole. What are you seeing?
Yes, I think, again, one of the silver linings that came out of this was the rapid adaption of patients and healthcare providers to telehealth. And we believe that's here to stay in certain cases. So prior to the pandemic, we've always had the tools and technology to do telehealth. Yet for us here at UCLA Health, less than 1% of our medical appointments were being performed by telehealth. Very soon, in the first few months of the pandemic, we saw that number soar to about 30%. And even now that we're fully open to everything, we have about 20% of our patients continuing to choose to have their visit by telehealth. What that's allowed us to do is open up a lot more capacity for in-person visits by those patients who truly do need to come in for a physical exam. So prior to the pandemic, right, again, the tools and technologies were there, but I think the pandemic really helped push that along, and it gave our patients confidence and also our healthcare team confidence that they could safely and appropriately care for certain types of patients. Additionally, we developed a lot of apps during that time that people could use on their iPhones, on their iPads to do remote monitoring. So people didn't have to come in as much for some of the routine care that was important to them, but we were able to communicate with the distance in their providers and get that information in a timely and accessible way. Additionally, I think, we just saw a surge of innovation around testing. We were one of the first to develop our own COVID-19 test in the state of California. And then very quickly, our researchers worked on developing a saliva test for COVID-19 that allowed us to really test large amounts, thousands of samples at the same time in a way that really allowed us to manage large populations. So we saw those things coming forward. And I think, again, what we've seen in a very short time on the research side with 3 very safe and effective vaccines emerging, that was also another benefit. And we participated in all those vaccine trials as they were coming forward. But I'm hopeful that our continued investments in innovation and our investments in public health will position us much better in the future.
Yeah, I think that's interesting from a consumer of health services standpoint. I think the entire industry, and UCLA Health is no exception, did a fantastic job creating consumer confidence. Confidence that you can have effective healthcare being managed through telehealth, which is something that, to your point, has been around for a long time, but has been completely underutilized. And I think that's here to stay. So that's a wonderful innovation that we've seen progress in. Okay, so coming off that question, Paul, how has architectural design been impacted by COVID? I mean, we see the work, the space that we're in, our office space, whether it be your office at home, your office at the office. What is changing? What is the future of design in a post-pandemic world? And what do you see it looking like?
Sure. Well, we specialize in commercial development, malls and mixed use developments. And here in the US, the commercial, real estate market in terms of malls and things was in big trouble before COVID. So a lot of our work was looking at how to repurpose existing facilities, add residential to malls and, places like Sears and many other companies that went out of business. But, I see design being something that's really going to boom post-COVID. I think that companies will look to designers for, to strengthen their brand, define their brand. And I think there'll be a lot more individual choice for architecture. I mean, a lot of design in the world is very staid. I mean, cars look alike, buildings look alike. And I think we're going to see a renaissance like in the 20s and 30s where, feels like industrial design and stuff that really become individualistic. So we're very excited about the future.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Paul, as somebody who started my my college career as an architecture major, I have tremendous respect for the work and all the efforts that are put into everything that you do. Okay, so let's shift back to the consumers, and I want to ask Kofi, how has the residential real estate market changed over the last 18 months? What have you seen there from a consumer standpoint?
Well, we've seen quite a bit of change, and the blessing for us is my firm's model is very different. So we help buy and sell. That's our core competency. But we also build, invest, and develop. We work with developers. We work with architects like Paul, with our development partners. So we're seeing where the trends are going and how those translate into residential. The primary consumer that we're servicing. But I wanted to give just a few stats that I had shared with my team in our weekly meeting, just to give you a sense of where the market is this year versus last year. So if we look at April 2020 versus April 2021, if you look at about the $1.1 million market up to 2.5, there were 282 properties on the market, 381 in the next year. So we had a 35% increase, but we had a 142% increase in the sold properties. It was 32 versus 92. And then when we push forward into the LA market, which is even more of a luxury market, so 2.5 million and beyond, those numbers get even more extraordinary. I'll just jump to the solds. We had 47 solds in that price range in April 2020 versus 209, okay, in 2021. So 345% increase there. So the demand has been through the roof. What people are looking for has been a result of being safer at home, having to work from home, having to teach from home, the homeschooling, the sheltering in place, having a place to work where there's natural light coming in, having to still entertain yourself now in that home environment. And as we heard on the last panel, there's a shift now to not having office space, to if you're going to work from home, what's that home environment looking like? At the same time, there was a tremendous amount of wealth gained over that same period. So we saw the pent-up demand, but we saw consumers who were able to enter the marketplace who weren't able to before. So we've seen all of that come into play, marry that with low interest rates, and we've just had, again, more demand really than we've ever seen before. So even from what we're seeing on the developer side, everything from touchless to keyless entry to more wellness being built into the properties, both on a residential, commercial, and development standpoint, all of these things were some of them born out of the pandemic, but we will not see them leaving anytime soon.
Thank you, Kofi. I think, as I hear you talk about some of these numbers, intellectually, I would have estimated that the numbers would have been up. But to hear a 345% increase in home sales of luxury homes in that same time frame, it's astounding. And it only goes to show the importance of the home and what it means to so many people today. Okay, so we've heard a bit about changes, survival, innovations. I want to focus on people. Janice, what skill sets are necessary for those who want to be healthcare leaders, those who are healthcare leaders? How have they changed in the last year and a half? What does it look like in a post-pandemic world, more importantly, and how is it different? What are you seeing from a people standpoint?
Well, I think, we've seen some new core competencies emerge. The first that I would say is definitely resilience. It takes a lot of resilience to certainly lead a healthcare organization through what we've seen with the pandemic. And I think in particular here in Los Angeles, the challenge that we had is we had two complete surges. We had a surge at the first phase of the pandemic. Then we were able to get things under control again. And then after the holidays, we saw that huge second surge. So the amount of stamina that we needed for our workforce to really get through those two surges was really challenging. And we needed to be so creative on how we could support the workforce, things we could do for wellness, any kind of wraparound services, when the reality is people were just exhausted and needed rest after that second surge. So that was definitely challenging. And, while we've endured healthcare shortages many times, throughout my career, I've seen that. We actually had significant challenges during that second surge because we simply did not have enough workforce even in our community. So we had to be really innovative on every day redesigning care to keep staff safe and keep our patients safe. So with that comes also the tremendous amount of flexibility that's needed, the ability to really think on your feet and plan and replan every day. Every aspect, as I mentioned, of our normal operating business changed completely. And it kept evolving through the pandemic as we were learning more and as we were presented each day with new challenges. So definitely adaptability, flexibility, stamina, I would say are the top three.
Thank you. And I want to stay with people for another moment here. Shifting over to Paul. So Jurdy is a minority-owned firm. And I'd like to ask you, from your standpoint, why is that important? what does it ultimately mean to your employees and your customers? Meaning, how does it translate?
Well, I think it shows. I mean, architecture is a wonderful profession and it attracts people that are very curious about important cultural, social, science issues. And I think it demonstrates that we're committed to those things. And, we're an international company. We have, offices all over the world. And I think clients appreciate that. And I think it helps us do our work. But we never really went at this like in a formulaic way. I mean, Journey, when I started in the early 90s, we had hired the first African-American woman licensed architect in California. And she led our technical department. This was long before, the current state of things. And 74% of our staff are people of color. 2 of our 7 owners are women. But again, we hire by merit and talent. That's always what we look for, and I think that's driven our diversification of the company. And it just hasn't been something we've said, let's do this to get these certain numbers together. It just worked out that we were embracing the people with the best talent and understanding of different cultural ideas in the world.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, Paul. It's almost what you're saying is embrace talent and innovation comes to you. And it sounds like it's been a very successful model. I want to shift to the bigger picture here. So let's talk about some specific industries at a high level. So we saw destination markets get severely impacted during COVID. Kofi, I'm curious to know how developers are now approaching the local markets versus the destination markets today. How has that changed? What do you see tomorrow?
Well, the good thing is there's still tremendous demand for housing and there's still a housing shortage. So even locally, while we've had to pivot based on the pandemic, based on the cost of lumber, the cost of construction, there's still going to be demand for housing and there's still going to be people who are willing to fill that demand. It's still LA, right? And there's still, again, people who want to live here. There's been an interesting shift, though, in the destination market and the second home market, and a new term that came out of this called co-primary homes. So now, even with the shift away from the home office or even the actual office, we're seeing people who are working from home, but working from home in a different city because now the company, corporation, the working for themselves, it allows for that. So we've seen people who are spending 2-3 months at a different destination and then 2-3 months at home and their primary home and then their co-primary home. And then the second part was just getaways. Like the 2-hour getaway destinations from LA saw a tremendous uptick. So the Big Bears of the world, Temecula, the Palm Desert, those markets were so hot when it came to demand and properties selling quickly that it was hard for them to even keep up. They're still struggling to keep up. The developers are also seeing that and looking even beyond our borders. We have a Cabo division at my firm and Baja California Sur, where we're seeing tremendous demand as well because it was deemed one of the first health safe destinations in the world where their protocols are top notch. I've been down there and you step into a phone booth and it sprays you down, it sprays your luggage down, and it's a safe place to be. So, the developers, the smart developers realize that memories are short. The demand for housing is going to be there. The demand for lifestyle is going to be there. And whoever's first in line to meet that will be the ones at the front of the table.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. You're right. We're seeing a lot of changes because of the changes in consumer behavior and needs and supply and demand. It's not there right now. And I think we're going to see a lot of changes to the way homes are built, multi-family units are created, designed, and built as well. I want to stick to opportunities of growth here. And so we've got just a few more questions left in this panel. Janice, from your standpoint, what are some of the hottest areas of growth in the healthcare arena? What are you seeing from a pure business standpoint?
I think some of the most exciting areas in healthcare, and particularly in patients we serve, is really all of the work that we're doing in precision health, right? Understanding more about patients, about their specific disease, and identifying treatment plans that really work best for them. Some of the work that we're doing in cancer care with emerging new therapies, the cellular therapy programs that we're doing, a lot of the work that we've done to really combat and fight the most difficult cancers. Patients are living longer and they're surviving. And we continue to look at so many growth and development opportunities in our pursuit of curing cancer. And then I would say, in general, one of the biggest opportunities, particularly for us in a city of 10 million people, is preventative health and really understanding the healthcare disparities that we see in our city, understanding what's causing those, working to remove barriers to access to care so that we can treat people in a more timely way and really give them the best chance of health outcomes. And again, I think through the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw the disproportionate impact, particularly in communities of color, of COVID-19. And we know that we have a lot of work to do in that area, particularly in Los Angeles.
Yeah, Johnny, so I think that's interesting. I mean, as a cancer survivor and somebody who's actively involved in the cancer community, we are seeing, because of technology, because of advances in healthcare, we're seeing more survivors. And with more survivors equates to, a whole nother, it's a great thing. At the same time, there are issues there that survivors are dealing with that we haven't seen in a long time. So there's an opportunity for more work to be done. So thank you for all that you're doing in that area. Before I get to my last question for the group, I want to stay on growth and kind of just talk one more moment about real estate, because we've seen so much growth in different segments over the last year, from industrial to multifamily, to the residential. My question is, Kofi, your firm has sold a lot of properties, but you've also been purchasing properties, over $20 million in properties in the LA market now, just since you started your company. How are you finding these opportunities, and how are you underwriting deals in such a competitive market?
Yeah, so part of it is just letting people know what you're doing. A while back, I came up with my 4 keys to networking and referrals. It's who you know, who also knows you, who knows what you do, and who likes you. And so once people knew that we weren't just a brokerage, we weren't just brokering properties, but we also would buy properties, we were often their first call, because we can sell the property for them, or we can cut them a check and bring in, our investors. So we were syndicating deals. Usually it's about being first to the table in a non-competitive situation. Sometimes there's a death in the family. Sometimes people have inherited properties. And we just created a creative deal structure that would either net them more money, ease the transition out of the property, or put more money in their pockets faster, like releasing deposits quickly. And then we syndicate the deals. We let our clients, I do a lot of work with sports and entertainment clients. We let them invest with us as well. And then when it comes to the underwriting, we look for an increased margin in this market. Like, I've worked with developers for years and flippers for years, and a lot of them, 12, 14%, they can do that all day. We're looking at deals where we're north of 30, 35%. And that acts as a hedge against market shifts. It acts as a hedge against the cost of lumber, the cost of construction. And so we can then deliver to our investors a much greater return than the typical return, because we're looking for deals that are really fat on that ROI. So if we see a deal, 15%, 20%, that's great, but we're not going to buy it. If we see one that is much meatier than that, we'll write the check for it. And that's been the strategy that we've employed. And soon, the next thing we'll be doing is putting together a fund so that we'll have more to just deploy as these opportunities continue to come up, both in residential, but multifamily and development as well.
Kofi, I'm going to ask you to repeat. I think you said either the 4 or the 5 no's. I thought they were fantastic. I want to write those down. Can you repeat those?
You got it. So the keys to successful networking and referrals: 1, it's who you know. 2, who also knows you. 3, almost the most important one, who knows what you do. And 4, who likes you. And the likable part isn't about being engaging, it's about being interested. It's about listening. And that will make you more likable than talking, to be honest.
I appreciate that. I think that's fantastic. We can all learn from that. Thank you. Okay, so we're down to our last question from this group, and I'm going to ask that everybody share their thoughts, but keep it to about 30 seconds, because I don't want to shorten our last panel here. So this is the state of LA. So I'm going to ask you how you rate the current state of LA in the broader sense. So consider everything from the economy and physical health of the region to social impact and growth potential. On a scale of 1 to 10, where do you rate the current state of LA, and a very quick why? Let's start with Janice.
Okay, well, I'm going to say an 8, but on our path to a 10, and I'll tell you why I'm so positive about that. Looking at what we went through, you know, LA could have very easily looked like New York, and we didn't, right? We had great leadership in our city. We had support from the mayor, the city council, emergency medical services, public health, the business community, the hospital association, to really work together to comply with the stay-at-home orders early on and get our positivity rate and the spread of this disease under control. That took enormous effort. I almost feel like we get so much credit as a healthcare system, but the business community in this city was amazing in what they had to sacrifice and what they had to do with their own businesses to help keep the city safe. And with the support that they gave us as a healthcare system, I felt like we could get through anything together. And we've learned so much from it. I think we're better prepared than almost any city around the country.
All right, wonderful. So we've got an 8 from Janice. Kofi.
I'm going to piggyback that. I'm going to go with an 8, primarily because there's always room to improve. Like, let's think about this. I think Jennifer Post said it in the last panel. It's still LA. You know, we have the great weather, we have the beaches, we have the sports teams, we have the Olympics coming, we have the Super Bowl coming. I mean, you can't trade that for anything, which is why even if people are leaving, there's enough demand that there's always somebody willing to fill that seat, ready to buy that house. I think we have to marry that against, or hedge that against, the challenges that we have. You know, the increased homelessness, the housing shortage, you know, the potential loss of 1031 exchanges, where I know a lot of our clients have built their portfolios and built their wealth. But I think the resiliency and the spirit of the LA community is going to take us to a 10 in no time.
All right, so we've got 2 8s with potentials for 10. Paul,
Yes.
Close us out. What do you think?
I'm going to have to say a 5, and not to discount all the things that were said about, you know, the problems we've had in the last year, but I think Patrick said, you know, the political leadership and business have to work much closer together, and I think that's a real deficit for the city. And we've spent a lot of time with the mayor. I went overseas with him, and we know working with the city council to, you know, attract business and that type of thing. But I think if that could improve, I could see us on the way to a 10.
Well, I appreciate the comments from each of you, Paul, Kofi, and Janice. Thank you so much for your expertise, for sharing your time with us today. We wish you all the best in the next year and the upcoming years ahead. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're now going to move into our final panel of the afternoon. It's a financial outlook. So we're going to jump right into things. Please welcome our panelists. Noor Manai, President and CEO of CTBC Bank. Bruce Munster, Managing Director, Private Wealth Advisor for Merrill Private Wealth Management. Dr. Betty Uribe, Managing Director for JP Morgan Chase, California. And our moderator, Robert Taylor, President and CEO, Centinela Capital, and partner at 35711. Robert, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
It is my pleasure to be here. Thank you, Josh, for that introduction. Thank you also, Alex, even the whole LA Business Journal team for creating this forum and for assembling, as this introduction underscores, a remarkable collection of business leaders for this and the other couple panels. I am delighted to have the opportunity to lead this discussion, moderate this discussion of the financial outlook for LA and beyond. As a result of the size of the economy here, LA's dynamism, the diversity of that economy, and of its people, as well as our position here on the Pacific Rim, as a gateway for trade and culture, LA is often thought of as offering a window into the future. We clearly heard a lot of that in the last panel. We're going to continue that as well here and zoom out for a few macro perspectives. So let me get right into it with the panel. I'd like to start with a group question. First, as we emerge from the pandemic, what changes in the local economy of the last year do you want to see remain in place, and which others would you like to see go away into the dustbin of history? Any good examples or unique stories you'd like to share? Bruce, let's start with you.
Well, thank you, Robert, and thank you, Josh, and everybody. What an incredible group. I want to start by giving a brief shout out to my colleagues Raul Anaya and Nikki Katz, who joined me on the LA500 list this year. For those of you not aware, Raul was just promoted to run all of business banking at B of A, serving nearly 40,000 mid-sized business owners. And Nikki manages and runs all of B of A's mobile and online banking products for all 66 million customers. So they have way bigger jobs than I do. As for your question, Robert, the biggest thing I noticed in the local economy was that traffic got way better, at least for a little bit. But in all seriousness, I mean, not unique to LA, but the knowledge economy transitioned to work from home very, very efficiently. And for the folks that make stuff, they were able to find ways to continue to work in this environment, right? And stay open, especially those essential businesses. And so, for me, by not commuting, and for a lot of folks I know, we get time back in our day, more time to work, more time with our families. And that time I may have otherwise used for my morning commute, I have found time to read the Bible cover to cover over the past year. So it's really been incredible. As for unique stories, there's so many stories of resilience and folks that were creative and found creative solutions to this incredible challenge. But one that really stands out is Exponential Fitness. They are the business that owns Cycle Bar and Club Pilates and now Rumble Boxing and others. And I met with the founder and owner in January of last year and explained to him how bad this was and how serious it was and what the potential impact could be. And given China's response, what could happen if we ultimately saw a similar response, which of course we did with the lockdowns and so forth. And so what they did was remarkable. They shifted from all their studios. They have almost 2,000 of these franchisees. They shifted, really beefed up their online and digital content, and even did really creative things like started renting out their bikes so people could take the bikes and do those exercises, continue to focus on their fitness from home. And remarkable to say that even with lockdowns around the country, they didn't lose a single franchisee, which I found to be really incredible.
Well, thank you for those comments. And in fact, I noticed the traffic being down as well. And the implication for that, for me, I was born and raised in LA, and the bluest skies I've ever seen in my entire life. And that was a welcome change as much as I love the city. Noor, same question to you. Any examples that you'd like to see go away and others that you'd like to see remain in place?
Sure, Robert. And I wanted to thank the LA Business Journal for having me. Great panels that came before us, and I'm sure this one will outdo all of them. So the two things that we've sort of noticed, one is about acceleration. There's the old line from Gibson about the future has arrived, it's just unevenly distributed. I think we've done over this 1 year, we've done so much acceleration of catching up with the future. And the real life examples of firms that were technology laggards, firms that thought of themselves as not having the resilience or the capability or the talent to actually exist at the vanguard or the front edge of technology. This period, this extremely trying period that we went through, forced us to adopt those technologies and to make them work. And I'm not just talking about the ability to do video conferencing, but to service our customers, whether you're a bank or you're in retail or you're in the service industry. We heard the previous panel talk about, the promise of telehealth actually came into its own because of the exigencies this crisis created. So to me, it was wondrous to see that the crisis forced this wholesale adoption and embrace of the acceleration, this future that we were all waiting for patiently, but we thought would arrive 10 years hence. And then the second was around choice. And it was the choice of how we work. It was the choice of how we consume. It's the choice of how we shop. And that also, to me, it's a little bit different than just having the freedom to work from home. But it's also, it relates to the potential of what people had always said they wanted to do with their lives. We had talked about, do I really have to, as Bruce just mentioned, do I really have to waste 3 hours of my life every day commuting? What could I do with that? So acceleration and choice were the two things that I really stood out for me. And then there were so many examples of innovation. I think I'll put a blanket around it and talk about, rather than pick any one example, of just the category of people catching up and being able to adopt these new paradigms, these new models, and making them work as quotidian everyday things is really the achievement for me.
Great thoughts, good insights. I like that notion of the future being unevenly distributed, but catching up, that's a key thing for us.
Right.
Dr. Uribe, what things did you observe that you'd like to see stay, and which would you like to see go to the dustbins of history?
Thank you, Robert, so much. As I take a look at what's happened during the pandemic and right now after the pandemic, what I would love to see remain in place is the ability for business owners to really innovate and to reach out to other business owners. What I have found is a collaboration between companies. For example, Leo Razzo and Teresa Razzo, they are some of our clients that have been with us for decades, and they own a couple of restaurants, Cambalache and Villa Roma. And what they did was they went out to other restaurant owners and they formed a cooperative, if you will, and they brought them in and they started really feeling like, now if you think about a restaurant can really go down in the middle of the pandemic when everything was closed, but they didn't just focus on themselves. They focused out and they brought in other people, other restaurants. Not only did they do that, but listen to this, this is amazing, what they fed 250,000 homeless people. They also fed about 25,000 families that were displaced. And they did that by collaborating with their suppliers. And so if you think about the innovation and the ability to go out and really work together as one and to really affect the community, that is the one thing that I would love to see remain in place. What I would love to see go away is what is happening in our country right now, the divisiveness, the hatred, and the lack of respect that we're all starting to see. We see the news. That I would love to see go away. And I would love to have that be replaced with love, respect, kindness, care, and a little bit of goodness, pixie dust.
Again, terrific comments. That notion of innovation combined with the generosity and caring to feed the homeless. That is really a testament to the spirit of LA. Thank you all for those comments. Let's take it to another level, because our viewers today are looking for hard takeaways. Let me start again with you, Bruce. We see that markets remain volatile. Prices are generally elevated, if not increasing. Where are you finding the best long-term opportunities in these markets?
Well, thank you, Robert. With the election, the economy reopening, and all this fiscal stimulus that really led to an acceleration. And so there was a big pivot that started November of last year from growth to value. So financial cyclicals, those type businesses, and we still very much favor stocks relative to bonds or cash. So with the S&P 500 here, trading around 22 times expected earnings of about 190 per share in aggregate. That is high relative to history, but when you look at the inverse of the PE and you consider that the earnings yield's 4.5% and the 10-year treasury is sitting around 170, that spread is historically high. And so we think that this 22 times could be the new normal in this low rate world that we find ourselves in. And so looking into next year, into 2022, we think earnings could push to 220 or higher. So there's still some meaningful upside. As to the business you're in, we too like real assets. We've allocated to a couple top sponsors that are really focused on multifamily and industrial. And with all the disruption and change we see in the world, everyone has to have a place to live, right? And e-commerce and the convenience that it provides is not going away. And so the demand for multifamily and industrial is going to continue to remain very robust. And so we see opportunities investing in core plus strategies between cash flow and income. And we do expect some cap rate compression to really earn mid to high teen type returns. And structures we have offer monthly liquidity. So it just brings a lot, right? I mean, it's very low correlation to public equity, so we get bang for our buck from a diversification standpoint. And if inflation does pick up, these are inflation positive type assets.
Terrific. 22 times price earnings as the new normal. Noor, pick up from there. How are CTBC's clients and really the market in general looking at Los Angeles for investment, particularly from a technology to a real estate and other key factors point of view?
Sure. So just carrying on from the great opening that my straight man Bruce gave me, it is absolutely he's right about the optimistic view. What we're hearing from the client filter, the client perspective, is they're taking an intellectual view, I guess is the best way to call it, because there's huge consensus around the fact that everything that Bruce mentioned, those fundamental factors, macro and micro, around stimulus, around pent-up savings, around, people are calling it, the analog is being drawn to what happened in the 20s when we came out of the Great Depression. The roaring 20s is often called in as an analogy. So there's all of that. But there's also, they're asking really good questions around how long does that last? When will the inflections come in? What will inflation do? The echoes and themes we heard in this panel, as well as the other two panels, around some of the structural infrastructure, cultural issues that the United States faces, and some microcosm of which exists in LA as well. So there is this general consensus that we need to go big around real estate, around technology, and the other categories around climate, around health. But there is also a cautious questioning, which I'm sure Bruce gets all the time, is how long will it last? When will inflation rear its ugly head? Who's the right person to talk to? We are unique in the banking landscape, is that we represent a majority of our business comes from the Pacific Rim, because we are a bank that's headquartered in the Pacific Rim in Taiwan. And so we see a lot of, I have in my 10 years of working in this organization, and before that at JP Morgan and Citi, basically doing international banking, I have seen, very rarely have I seen this much level of interest in expansion. So very specifically expansion into distribution and office, expansion into manufacturing, to ride on to the wave of onshoring that is both politically and economically now expedient. And on the technology side, banks, as you know, don't get into the startup early stage, but a lot of what the other financial firms do. So that's definitely being helped by the fact that our LA is seen as a very viable alternative to Silicon Valley, even though some of the forces that were making people consider moving from San Francisco around housing and the urban issues in San Francisco are migrating to LA as well. But I believe it's at an early enough stage that they can be managed. But certainly the tech sector is booming at a historical sort of level, in the sense that it's not just the technology investors, not technology companies, it's how much of real mom and pop is moving digital. So if you were a small business, we have an example of a very large garment manufacturer that during the crisis, during the pandemic, moved most of its retailing onto Amazon Marketplace. And they didn't make up everything that they needed to, but it was a big boost. So there is going to be there is a lot of interest in being in LA and being part of the vibrancy and being part of the rising tide that almost everybody, including myself, is sure that's going to be here at least for a couple of years.
That's a terrific continuation of the unpacking that Bruce started. Let me see if I can do a quick summary and ask you, Dr. Uribe, to talk about how that what the implications of those factors for your work. We've heard about stimulus and pent-up demand versus some coming uncertainties in terms of potentially inflation, cultural issues, and innovation reaching all sectors, including potentially your clientele. That is mom and pops moving digital. So since so much of the work you've done is more focused on rebuilding the community, particularly expanding JP Morgan Chase's presence in low to moderate income communities and across the state. And the fact that your chairman, CEO Jamie Dimon, has talked a lot about the overall importance of individual communities and the roles that they play in helping our economy grow. Tell us how and why anyone should start or invest in a new business in Los Angeles.
Well, it's interesting that you say this because I happen to be sitting at the Crenshaw office, and this is one of our offices that are really focused on the community and on rebuilding the community. One of the things that you have heard Jamie Dimon talk about is the importance of all of us united, not just JP Morgan Chase, but all of us united, going out and building the community. Well, let me show you where I'm at. And let me show you, because I just happen to be here, I want to show you this. This is our Crenshaw community branch. And what we do is, this is the first of its kind in California. And this is a room that is a community room. It is over, it's here so that we can invest in the community, and we're here to teach the community about the vibrancy, about health and financial health. And so what this team has done, and we've picked up people specifically who are licensed to do this and who are trained to do this, to go out and to help business owners grow their business and to help the community learn about financial health, and to help people get into their homes. Now, we have the commitment all the way up from the very top, so much so that Jamie was here meeting with our people and meeting with the community just about an hour ago. And so I think that for all of us, it's really important to really focus on the community, but it isn't just the financial institutions. We believe that we would like to collaborate and to partner up with other organizations. So when you have a trifecta, when you have the financial institutions, business, and the community together, that is where the magic happens. But it only happens when the corporations make a real commitment to really go out into the community to really support the community grow. And so that's something that we've seen here. And we're starting to see some amazing results from our community. They just absolutely love what we're doing. Very innovative, and it's time, and the time is now.
I really appreciate those comments. That's the community I grew up in. Let's maybe shift the dial a little bit. We talked about a lot of the macro factors, but one that's looming out there that I know it's important for business and for business people. And that is President Biden is making clear that he wants to raise taxes on the wealthy to help fund his infrastructure plan and the American Family Act. Bruce, what are your plans doing to prepare?
Sure, thank you, Robert. Everything they can is the short answer. So look, higher taxes are the price that we'll have to pay to cover the additional $4 trillion of spending for Biden's economic agenda, specifically the infrastructure bill and the American Family Act. Biden grabbed headlines again this week when he came out stating he wants to hike the current capital gains tax, which is 20% federal and 3.8 for the ACA or net interest income tax, right? So 23.8 up to 43.5. And so, and further to make that retroactive to April 30th, and then take away the stepped up basis. And you mentioned the 1031 exchange and so forth. So this raises the money needed to cover the additional deficit for this agenda over the next 10 years. But where things get more complicated is the Senate is split 50-50. And so, Democrats have nowhere near the 60 votes they need to avoid a filibuster. And so maybe that's why you get some cries to get rid of the filibuster, right? But, it's not clear that there's like a pathway through here. I mean, the Senate parliamentarian would have to go through another reconciliation process, and we're not hearing too much about that. So ultimately what we need is compromise, right? Dr. Uribe talked about people coming together. They do need compromise, and it seems that from all the folks I've talked to up and down the street that there is compromise with a skinnier bill that's more focused on traditional infrastructure around long-term capital gains that are maybe 26 to 28%. You add in again the ACA tax, you get to 30 to 32 roughly. So it'll still be a very meaningful increase, but I think we do ultimately get some type of compromise. I don't think it's going to be, this year. I'm not worried about retroactive tax. So all the scare tactics folks here, we may see some other good stuff too. I mean, there's a big push for a lifting of the SALT caps. And so, deducting your very high state income tax has been something that folks from California and New York and clients we serve in those markets have always enjoyed. But it's been, capped at 10. So it'd be a real blessing to see that fixed and addressed. And, with the fiscal windfall that Aunt Nancy delivered to Gavin in the state of California, some of our popular planning techniques like nings and dings are not going away. And so there was legislation in Sacramento that would have negated the benefit of these strategies, which many of our clients will use, and that was dropped. So a lot of top lawyers really saw that as a quasi endorsement. So this will continue to play out, but tax rates, probably go higher, and we are hoping for compromise.
Wow. Compromise is a watchword, I think, as we go forward, if we're actually going to make progress, and both you and Dr. Uribe spoke to that. This has been a very rich discussion. We are running out of time. We have just time enough for lightning rounds. So here's a lightning round question. Try to keep your responses to 30 seconds. If you had to focus on just a few issues, and this is very challenging in a region as big and as diverse and as vibrant as Los Angeles, which sectors do you think are going to be the biggest, most important ones to watch over the next 2 to 3 years? Dr. Uribe, you first.
Well, I think that over the next 2 to 3 years, some of the watch outs are there's so many business owners that are brand new business owners, brand new entrepreneurs, because they've left their companies and they've opened up now. So access to capital is going to be really important. That is a watch out. Another watch out would be the opportunity for networking and for continuing to grow closer together. If what I've seen across California is businesses that are thriving are the businesses that are going out and working with others and collaborating. And by collaborating, they're able to expand their business and they're able to disrupt. And so if we continue to do this, then those businesses will be able to continue to grow. And so that's what we've seen with a lot of our customers. And those are some of the things to look out for.
Bruce, lightning round question for you. You raised the issue of inflation. What are Bank of America's thoughts about how it will impact our markets?
This is not a lightning round answer, but I'll give it a shot. So look, we all the data we're seeing still suggests that it's transitory. So Michelle Meyer, our head of U.S. economic research, sees big pickup in credit card spending. We hear anecdotally stories of lumber prices going to the moon, right, and building costs going up, but when you look deeper in the data, you see that the price of wood isn't changing that much. So we're kind of dealing with this demand shock, right, with the economy reopening and consumers and corporations being flush with cash and looking to invest. So we think this takes a couple quarters to sort out. And ultimately tying this back to the markets, I think this inflation concern really kind of peaks this summer. And when it does, that may cause overdue correction in equities. It doesn't change our long-term outlook. We actually are, very bullish, as I mentioned, but, if anything, that fear, I think, peaks this summer. And so that's what we'll be looking for.
Terrific. And Noor, your lightning round question to close us out. Why don't you take on the question of international trade in 30 seconds? What's the current outlook, especially with respect to Asia and the Pacific Rim? And if you want to talk about international relations along the way, you have 30 seconds to cover all that.
Oh, I'll leave the international relations things to much more qualified people. But certainly, look, California is a destination for international foreign direct investment. There are 19,000 foreign firms in California, 730,000 jobs, representing about 65 billion in wages. That's a That's a huge number. It's a very impressive number. It just attests to the attraction of California in general. You take LA off that number, LA represents about 5,000 foreign organizations with 200,000 jobs and millions of dollars in wages. And it's also interesting, it's who the countries are that are investing here. So it's a who's who, right? If you wanted partners to be investing, it's led by Japan, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, China, Taiwan, all these, South Korea. And there is, from our network, we are in all the Pacific Rim countries. We are local in all the Pacific Rim countries. We hear nothing but optimism about being part of the rising tide that everybody expects the US to go through. In terms of the actual numbers, these numbers don't actually tell the whole story, because this is just it's when firms apply for licenses and actually declare themselves to be foreign organizations, but it's what's happening with entrepreneurs. So we get inquiries all the time from Japan and the other Pacific Rim countries about individuals or small companies wanting to move to the United States and operate American businesses. And that number is represented in the amount of housing stock that is being bought by overseas investors, and the amount of investment that they are asking us to facilitate through the purchase of commercial real estate in distribution and warehouse and manufacturing facilities. So it's the FDI numbers are very, very impressive, but they don't tell the whole story. And it is an upbeat story.
Upbeat, the watchword. It seems like everyone is optimistic. Let's give you and Bruce a chance to answer the final question as well that Dr. Uribe has already addressed. And that is, which of the 2 or 3 sectors do you think are the biggest to watch over the next 2 to 3 years? Nor stay on the floor. Go ahead and give us those 2 or 3 sectors.
Sure. I think, everybody's talked about housing and commercial real estate. I think that has Southern California, as everybody has told me when I moved here about 10 years ago, is a lot to do with real estate, and that I think will continue. The exciting new things that are happening here that I see a lot of depth in now is research around climate. So while the Center for Climate Tech doesn't currently exist in California, it's rapidly moving here from the East Coast and from the Pacific Rim countries. And it's just very, very exciting to see all the acknowledgement that climate change is real and technology needs to be invented. And as I said, technology that can be used in everyday applications, not just in reducing carbon footprints and emissions, but also in harnessing at a normal household level the advantages of alternative energies. And obviously, infrastructure is something that we actually are sorely in need of investment in LA, the ports, the airports, the roads, and the housing stock as well, if you extend the definition there. These are things that I look forward to watching with keen interest.
Very good. Bruce, which 2 or 3 markets or industries do you think we need to keep our eyes especially on?
Yeah, so I think it's the same as it's been the last several years. Technology and consumer have long been areas that Los Angeles has really led. And so you look at the Snapchats and Beyond Meats and Revolves, more recently seeing Honest Company and Endeavor. But, kind of digging into a subcategory, I think LA really dominates interactive media. And you think about video games in that market, that's 2.5 billion people worldwide. I mean, LA is really the epicenter. Activision and EA, Riot, all these incredible games. Jam City just did their SPAC merger. There's so many amazing, talented people in that space. And so I really look for that interactive media segment to grow within Los Angeles and just grow overall.
Terrific. Thank you, Bruce, Dr. Uribe Noor, for your time and your very thoughtful comments. I think combined with the other 3 panels, we have some consensus on a very bright future ahead for our lovely city here, but a clear-eyed one that recognizes there are challenges to be overcome, that cooperation will be central to meeting those challenges, cooperation across the various constituencies that make up this dynamic and resilient regions. So with that, again, thank you for your time and the comments, and back to you, Josh.
Thank you so much. I want to thank our final panel. Thank you to Robert, Dr. Uribe, Bruce, and Noor. And please, everybody, help me just a virtual round of applause and a huge thank you to all of our panelists this afternoon, all of your time, your input, all the energy that you put into this program. Thank you so much. So many wonderful things that I think we've learned today. A lot of things to look forward to and a lot of things to look out for and watch how they translate as well. I want to remind you all that Monday's print and digital versions of the LA Business Journal are going to be highlighting this event. Additionally, there's going to be a recorded version of the entire program available on our site at labusinessjournal.com. This year's edition of the LA500 was particularly important just because of the challenges that so many of our leaders faced over the last year. I hope that you have a chance to review it. It just came out on Monday. We look forward to hosting you all again soon and look forward to seeing you next year. In the meantime, please stay safe and we'll talk with you soon. Thank you again.